Howdy folks, Doc here with Last Best Tool, and Olight has a new O-Knife that's available on the Obuy store, and this is it. And there was a feature on this thing that kind of shocked me. So what was that feature? Well, was it the heavily textured G10 scales in this rifle stock shape? Nope. Was it this overbuilt aluminum anodized with blue highlights pivot? Nope. Was it this heavily jimped flipping handle or deep pocket clip? Nope. Was it this crazy Wharncliffe blade? Nope. Was it this dual grind, hollow grind, flat grind blade? Nope. Was it this full length fuller? Nope. Was it this heavily jimped spine? Nope. What was the feature that shocked me? It was this right here. See that little arced cutout? What does that tell me? It tells me that Olight knows what this knife is for. That's what that's for. The Wharncliffe blade is probably one of the most misunderstood blade designs in knives. It was designed originally back in the early 1800s, essentially for much of the same reasons we have the traditional, if you look at this, utility blade. This thing is designed to maintain full blade contact through this straight edge throughout the length as you're using it. Now, in this case, this is a self-defense knife. This knife is designed as a blade, especially with that extra feature I pointed out, that will continue to cut from the beginning of contact all the way out to the point. Now, many blades, you could look at some of these other O-Knife blades, are designed for different utility applications, like this drop point, or the cleaver on this O-Freeze 3, or the kind of full belly but arced profile on the Parrot, or the Roboto here, the Roboto 2. This is actually a wonderful carry knife. Nice, smooth, effective drop point. Now, in the old days, there was something called a Bowie knife. This is a folding knife, this Benchmade here, and in fact, there's also the Tonto blade, but let's talk about those ends. So first of all, if you look at the blade profile, you've got essentially the potential for a swedge up here. In the old days, the Bowie design was sharpened, or could be sharpened on the top. Bowie was a knife that could cut both ways. And that's actually why David Bowie, the musician, chose that particular name as his stage name, David Bowie, because it cut both ways. Take that how you want. So most of the time, this is never sharpened, the upper swedge, and in many, many jurisdictions, it's illegal to have a knife that's sharpened on both sides. It becomes a dirk or a dagger. But in the case of most of these other knives, there is a self-defense application, but whether or not it's actually useful has to do with the blade design. These kinds of drop points are not that useful in terms of self-defense or fighting knives. The Wharncliffe is, and this was named after Lord Wharncliffe back in the early 1800s. And what it was a straight edge followed by a relatively sharp spine drop down to that edge. Whereas many others, they slowly roll the spine towards the edge, or heavily roll the spine towards the edge. Or in this case, you can see the cleaver blades kind of similar, but they don't have that cutting point. Now, when we go up to that point, let's take a look at something. What I've got is a box here, and if I drop the knife blade onto a point in the box. Let me turn it sideways so you can see the action here. And push down, what you're seeing is the inclined plane right here force that blade into a deeper cut. Now, if you take a traditional blade, let's say I'll do this Roboto 3, the Roboto 2, what is that one? Roboto 3. It's got a drop point blade, and as I push it in, what it's doing is it's causing the blade here to have to cut its own way in because the spine is no longer forcing the blade forward or deeper. And that's where this comes in. In many kinds of knife fights, there is an arc, and that is related to the radius of the appendage holding the knife, which is often the arm, swinging. So that can only swing in an arc because it's attached to the body. Now, if you engage that arc with a curved blade, what can happen is you can just roll that blade around. It does not continue to cut deeper. But if you have a flat blade and you encounter something and you keep moving, what it's going to do is force the motion to continue to engage the blade all the way to the end. So as you swing a blade, it continues to dive in. Whereas other blades, other shapes of blades, tend to swing out. They roll along the surface. So if I was slicing here, the surface here would actually follow the arc, and thus I would not get any deeper. Now, as I look at the Wharncliffe, I think, okay, but they also want to make this a functional blade, because Wharncliffes, they have a couple of really powerful uses, and then they kind of fall apart. I mean, just like utility blades. You don't want to gut a deer with a blade. You don't want to whittle as much with a blade. They're somewhat limited. And you even look at this as maybe more something like that. Instead, Olight has, for their Oknife here, involved a dual grind into that blade using what is a hollow grind here, which is very similar to what Buck uses on most of their blades. Extraordinarily sharp, but not nearly as strong. But then when they move out to the end, they do the traditional flat grind, which allows them to maintain the mass to support the tip. So when you are engaging something rather heavily, you do have enough mass, enough material up in the front end to hold together. Whereas if they tapered the blade off into a really fine point, you might end up losing too much material up here where it becomes fragile and breaks off, and you lose part of the reason that you have this blade design. So anyway, Lord Wharncliffe wanted a different design for a knife blade, and he basically commissioned ideas, and the Wharncliffe blade was born out of that. It's like a utility blade. It's a flat blade. That's the key to a Wharncliffe. It's got a flat blade all the way throughout its length, and then it's got a fairly sharp drop from the spine to meet the tip, and then it has the traditional spine back here. That's what defines a Wharncliffe. Now, there is no absolute definition of a Bowie, but generally a Bowie has a fairly large blade with a roll-up towards what we might consider kind of a drop point, except this part is clipped out, and generally that clip can be sharpened. In this case, no, because again, as I mentioned with jurisdictions, but there are others like this. You could see, you could sharpen that out, and then you have a knife that can cut in either direction. We don't see those very often, but again, this isn't the traditional drop point that you might see here with this Roboto 3, which gives it a much more useful, friendly appearance. So, kudos to Olight and Oknife and Obuy for pushing this thing out to try out some different directions in knife creation. And because they've got that indentation there, it tells me they fully understand what this thing is. It is a very light knife, but a very big knife. And it has a few purposes. And those purposes are distinct from these EDC knives, kind of with this traditional clip point, or the free. You can see this one. You got the Freeze 2 here with the traditional drop point, but a larger handle. This is a kind of a bushcraftish knife. It's large enough to do some serious work. Or the Roberto 3, which is a smaller, kind of a nice pocket feel knife. Or the Freeze 3, which is a cleaver style flipper. Kind of a neat design. Or the Parrot, which is a unique take, and it actually has what I think of more of an organic stone, like river stone feel. Very smooth in the pocket. Thumb flipper, because it's got the lever up at the top. Really nice feel there. Anyway, so this is the new one. It's Olight. It's a departure. It is definitely a knife that you don't want to misuse. Sheepfoot blades like this are one of the safest blades, whereas the Wharncliffe I consider one of the most dangerous blades. There's a good chance if you order one of these and play around with it, you're going to love it, but you're also going to cut yourself. And speaking of these two kinds of sheepfoot, I thought I'd show you these. These are both old timers, but they have a wildly different origin story. Let me crack these open. If you look at these, what you see is this one, this lower one, is a Schrade Walden. Both are made in the USA. That's just a regular old Schrade. Schrade Waldens are highly collectible. That was the earlier version of what the Schrade Knife Company was involved with. And they often had sheepfoot blades, which are fairly safe. But when you go into the other blade designs, you end up starting to explore things that may not be as safe for you. I do want to point out something here. You see this big oval here. I had done a review on this Civivi here. This is the Spiny Dogfish, and I love this knife. And many people pointed out that I was not operating it like this. Well, there's a very good reason I don't operate it like this, because now what do? It's stuck in my hand this way. And I was talking about it's a little bit harder to flip. What I like to do is release the detent just a little bit, and I can do that here, and then I can flick it out. But then I've got full control of the handle right away. Whereas if I hold the blade and flick it out, now I'm stuck with the blade, so I can either manipulate it from this position, which isn't very helpful, or I can do some mental or some finger gymnastics here, and then end up moving my hand down to the actual handle. So yes, I knew that was there. I just couldn't figure out why I would want to do it. I can do it lots of different ways. You can also do that here. I mean, but now I'm stuck up at the top, and I am totally not using this for what it's for. I have to do some flipping, and then I can get this crazy effective position using this indentation thumb ramp right above the fuller, right above the hollow grind. Boom. But if I just do that, flip it out here, there we go, and then end up holding it, this is not a safe handle or safe way to hold it. So here we go. Instead, boom, there I am, ready to go with a great grip on an extremely effective knife. And with that, Doc out.